Before Esther saved her people, before Haman nearly erased an entire nation, a single decision had already set everything in motion. 500 years earlier, one king disobeyed God. Not openly, not completely, but just enough. He spared one man, one compromise, one thing that seemed too small to matter. And centuries later, that unfinished act almost destroyed the entire story of redemption. There is a moment in the book of Esther that most people see as the story of a brave queen. And it is. But beneath that story lies another one. A story that began 500 years earlier with a king who obeyed God almost. And because he obeyed almost, a descendant of the man he spared rose to power in the Persian Empire and came within days of wiping out every Jewish person alive. No Jews, no return from exile, no rebuilt temple, no Messiah. The line of redemption almost ended, not because of an enemy from the outside, but because of incomplete obedience from within. The people Saul failed to destroy were the Amalekites, the only nation in Scripture against whom God declared war from generation to generation. To understand why, we have to go back to the beginning. In Genesis 36, hidden inside a long genealogy, we find the origin of Amalek. Esau, the older son of Isaac and brother of Jacob, had a son named Eliphaz. Eliphaz had a concubine named Timnah, and together they had a son named Amalek. That means Amalek was not a foreign enemy. He was the grandson of Esau and the great-grandson of Isaac. Esau knew God's covenant. He knew the promises made to Abraham. Yet he despised them. Scripture describes him as a man who traded something sacred for something temporary. The book of Hebrews calls him profane, not because he used bad language, but because he treated holy things as ordinary things. And that attitude passed from Esau into Amalek. But Amalek's bloodline alone does not explain God's judgment. What explains it is what Amalek chose to do. The first attack came in Exodus 17. Israel had just escaped Egypt. Pharaoh's army had drowned in the Red Sea. The people were exhausted, thirsty, and wandering through the wilderness. And that was exactly when Amalek attacked. Not when Israel was strong, not when they were organized. Amalek attacked the weak. Deuteronomy reveals an important detail. They struck the people at the back of the camp, the elderly, the sick, the children, and those too weak to keep up. This was not ordinary warfare. Even in the ancient world, there were rules. Armies fought armies. But Amalek hunted the defenseless, and they did so knowing exactly who Israel's God was. The nations had already heard about the Red Sea. They knew what had happened in Egypt. Yet Amalek attacked anyway. The battle that followed became one of the most famous scenes in Scripture. Moses stood on a hill with his staff raised. As long as his hands remained lifted, Israel prevailed. When his arms grew tired, Amalek gained ground. Aaron and Hur held Moses' arms up until sunset, and Israel won the battle. But what happened afterward is even more important. God told Moses, "Write this as a memorial in a book, because I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." Then Moses declared, "The Lord will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation." This was not simply punishment for one battle. It was a judgment against a pattern. And that pattern continued. Throughout the book of Judges, Amalek returned again and again. They always attacked when Israel was weakest. Centuries passed. Then came King Saul. By Saul's time, God's command had existed for generations. Samuel came to the king with a message. "Go and strike Amalek. Destroy everything. Spare no one." The Hebrew word used here is cherem. It means something devoted completely to God, something removed entirely from human possession. No trophies, no plunder, no exceptions. Saul marched against Amalek and won. But then he made a decision that would echo through history. He spared Agag, the king of Amalek. He also kept the best sheep, cattle, and livestock. When Samuel confronted him, Saul defended himself. He claimed the animals would be sacrificed to God. Samuel's answer became one of the most famous lines in the Bible. To obey is better than sacrifice. Saul had obeyed mostly, but mostly was not enough. Samuel executed Agag and delivered God's judgment. The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you. One king spared, one act of incomplete obedience, and 500 years later, the consequences returned. The kingdoms of Israel and Judah fell. The people were taken into exile. Eventually, they found themselves scattered throughout the Persian Empire. Then, in the book of Esther, another man appeared. His name was Haman, and scripture identifies him with a single title, Haman the Agagite, a descendant of Agag. The descendant of the King Saul failed to destroy. Haman did not simply seek power, he planned genocide. He persuaded King Xerxes to issue a decree ordering the death of every Jew in the empire, men, women, and children. The date was chosen by casting lots, known as Purim. The order spread across every province, and for a moment, it looked as though Haman would succeed. Mordecai mourned. Esther hesitated. The fate of an entire people hung in the balance. Had Esther remained silent, Jewish history might have ended in Persia. No return to Jerusalem, no rebuilding of the temple, no continuation of the line of David. The consequences of Saul's failure had reached across 5 centuries. And this raises an uncomfortable question. Why was God's judgment against Amalek so severe? Modern readers often struggle with this story, but Scripture presents Amalek's destruction not as ethnic hatred, but as a moral verdict. Amalek knew who Israel's God was. They attacked the weak anyway. They repeated the same pattern for generations. Again and again, they preyed upon those who could not defend themselves. God's declaration was a response to a deliberate pattern of cruelty. But there is another layer to the story. Amalek becomes more than a nation. It becomes a symbol. Throughout Scripture, evil always attacks the vulnerable. It strikes when people are exhausted, discouraged, and divided. And Saul's greatest failure was not rebellion. It was partial obedience. He obeyed almost. He destroyed almost everything. But almost obedience is not obedience. And that is the warning hidden inside this story. Because the real question is no longer, what happened to the Amalekites? The real question is, what have we left unfinished? What compromise have we allowed to remain? What destructive pattern have we defeated only halfway? Saul spared one king, one compromise, one thing that seemed harmless. And 500 years later, that decision nearly destroyed an entire nation. The New Testament presents Jesus as the opposite of Saul. Where Saul failed, Christ obeyed completely. Where Saul left the work unfinished, Christ declared, "It is finished." Not almost finished, not mostly finished, finished. That is the center of this story. The complete obedience that breaks the cycle. The one who finishes what human beings cannot. So perhaps the most important question is not what happened to Amalek. Perhaps the question is this: what are you leaving almost destroyed? And will you trust the one who finished his work completely to finish his work in you?